Hi, ESPN NBA reporter Tim Bontemps here to talk about the second edition of the 2021-22 NBA MVP straw poll. This is now the 9th time I've done this straw poll over the past 6 years, and we have the closest race so far that I've ever recorded. With Joel Embiid in first place, got 45 first place votes, has 789 total points. Nikola Jokic has 43 first place votes and has 754 total points. On top of that, Jokic is also left off of 5 ballots. And if he gets second place in those 5 ballots, as in the scoring system, it goes 10 for first, 7 for second, 5 for third, 3 for fourth, and 1 for fifth. 5 more second place votes. It's a dead heat going into the final 2 months of the regular season. And I really like doing this straw poll. I try to do it as scientifically as possible. I get a couple people from each of the 28 NBA markets. Obviously, New York and LA each have 2 teams. I also get some international folks to vote in it. And the goal is to try to mimic the actual NBA voting process as closely as possible. I'm not going to have the exact same panel of people, but I try to approximate it as best I can to get a real sense of where the race is at. Because as everybody knows, this is something people talk about throughout the season. Now, when I did the first straw poll back in December, Steph Curry had a massive lead, had frankly the biggest lead at that point that I'd ever recorded in one of these straw polls. So it's been a historic year for them. So what changed for Steph? Well, he had the worst shooting month of his career, arguably, in January. And the Warriors have gone from having the best record in the league and racing out to what looked like maybe a 65-win season to more coming back to the pack and now potentially finishing as low as third in the Western Conference standings, behind the Memphis Grizzlies and way behind the league-leading Phoenix Suns. So you put those two things together, and you combine that with the fact that Joel Embiid, who had 1 fifth-place vote in the first round of voting, has only missed 2 games over the past 2 months since that first poll came out in early December. And meanwhile, after the Sixers were stumbling at that point with Embiid sidelined, they dropped to 15-15 in mid-December. They've since roared back into the mix for a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And as a result, now that they have James Harden, have a chance to push up towards the top of the conference potentially over the next several weeks. And that coupled with Embiid's dominant play, he's just behind Yataseda Kupo in the race to be the leading scorer in the NBA this season, something no center has done since Shaquille O'Neal won his MVP award in 2000. You put all that stuff together, and that's allowed Embiid to have the slightest of leads over last year's MVP, Nikola Jokic, who was having his own incredible statistical season, lifting the Denver Nuggets, a team that's been without Jamal Murray all season and Michael Porter for the vast majority of it, to their own spot in the middle of the Western Conference playoff picture, despite having 2 of their 3 best players sidelined for much of the year and a bunch of other guys coming in and out of the lineup. And the numbers with Jokic on and off the court this season are truly remarkable. It's probably the single best advocacy for his candidacy. He never misses games, and whenever he's on the court, Denver looks like a super elite team, and whenever he's off the court, they look like a super awful team. Those two things, that's really the driving force behind his candidacy. After that, we had Yataseda Kupo in third place, trying to win his 3rd MVP award, and I think he has a shot to do it. We'll get a little bit more into that later on, but he finished 3rd. The other 2 guys to get first place votes, Giannis got 9 first place votes, Steph Curry got a single first place vote and finished 4th, and Chris Paul got a couple of them and finished 5th. But the main drivers are those 3 guys at the top of the ballot: Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Yataseda Kupo. Now, with how close this race is at the top, I think there's a good chance it's going to come down to who is able to have their team go on a big run in March and rack up a lot of wins and solidify themselves in the standings. Now, one interesting point on that front: the Philadelphia 76ers have the 7th hardest schedule in the whole league in the month of March. They have a bunch of marquee, difficult games. They play Milwaukee. They play Phoenix. They play the Nets on March 10th in a truly massive game if James Harden and Ben Simmons both play in that game. They play Denver, ironically enough. I believe that game is in Philly. They play Chicago. They have a bunch of big-time marquee games that if the Sixers can win a bunch of them, it's going to really boost Embiid's candidacy. But if they struggle to win them and he struggles to mesh with James Harden, all of a sudden the momentum he's got behind him at the moment could start to lag. Now on the other side, the Denver Nuggets, they have the 30th most difficult schedule in the month of March. if you are not quite aware, there are 30 teams in the NBA. That means the Denver Nuggets have the easiest schedule in the entire league in the month of March. I think they're going to rack up a lot of wins. Jamal Murray's probably going to come back sometime in the next several weeks. Or I shouldn't say probably. The hope is Jamal Murray will be back sometime in the next several weeks. The hope is Michael Porter Jr. will be back in the next several weeks. And Denver could rattle off a ton of wins down the stretch and get a lot of momentum going into the final couple weeks of the season, which is really when this award is often decided, in that month of March when somebody makes a push. Denver is going to be well positioned to do that. And then you've got the Milwaukee Bucks with Yataseda Kupo, who happens to be leading the league in scoring. He's having his own phenomenal season. And the Bucks seem like they might be positioned to take off here and go on a run. They've sort of been in cruise control. They're rolling along, but they're a couple games out of first place in the East. I could see them putting their pedal down, or putting their pedal to the floor, trying to get the number one seed. Now they're hoping to get Brook Lopez back in the next several weeks. Again, another team that's hoping to get healthy and get on a run going into the playoffs. I think if one of these teams can really make a big push, it could be the thing that tips this thing in one direction or the other. But after last year when we saw Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic go head-to-head all season long, really going down to the final couple of weeks of the season before Jokic ended up winning the MVP award, I suspect that it's going to be a similarly contested race here this year, and I'm very excited to see how it plays out. Now, a couple other things from the poll before we go to mention that I think are worth mentioning. Ja Morant finishes 6th. First time he got any votes in the MVP straw poll over the past several years that I've done it. I suspect he's going to be a fixture on it for years to come. Ja got a couple votes in a variety of categories across the board from 2nd to 5th, couple second-place votes, few third-place votes, and a bunch in 4th and 5th. He edges out DeMar DeRozan, who's had a phenomenal season. I think DeMar would have had a potential shot to be higher up this list, if not for the top 3 guys having just unbelievable seasons statistically. And also Chicago, while he's kept them afloat without Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball recently, he's been putting up some absolutely insane games, and it's been a heroic effort from him to keep the Bulls rolling. Chicago had a chance to really go on a big run here and maybe solidify that number 1 seed in the East. And if DeMar was putting up the numbers he was putting up, and Chicago was, say, 5 or 6 games ahead and firmly ensconced as a number 1 seed, I think it might have given DeMar's candidacy more of a boost. Instead, he finishes in 7th, and while there's really just 7 guys being considered for those top 5 spots, DeMar, I think if their record was a little better, because in large part if they were a little healthier, it's certainly no fault of DeMar's the way he's playing. I think he might even be higher up this list than he is, but he has been remarkable, and I would not be surprised if at the end of the season he's a little higher up this list. And I think we also need to talk about the one guy in the top 7 I haven't mentioned yet, which is Chris Paul, other than a brief mention at the beginning. Chris Paul finishes 5th. He really gets the credit for the way the Suns are playing. They're demolishing the league. I think ultimately, though, when you look at the video game numbers that these other guys are putting up, I just don't know if Chris is going to be able to get the kind of momentum necessary to jump to the top of the list. I think that the Suns would have to go on some kind of a crazy run over the final couple months of the season for him to really put himself in position to win that award, especially with guys like Ja Morant getting some votes too now for the way the Memphis Grizzlies are playing. It's just hard for me to see Chris doing it, despite the fact that he has been, again, having a phenomenal season. Certainly he's going to be in consideration, but I think it's more going to be for one of those couple spots at the end of the ballot rather than one higher up. And 2 final things to note, guys that got either little mention or none on this poll. Kevin Durant was 2nd in the vote back in December. Obviously, the MCL sprain he suffered a few weeks ago, coupled with the Brooklyn Nets' precipitous fall down the standings into the play-in tournament spots in the Eastern Conference, has pretty much eliminated KD's candidacy. Now, look, he could come back in the next couple of weeks here after the All-Star break, go on a huge run in March. Maybe it throws things into flux if the Nets go rocketing up the standings. But given everything that's going on with that team, I suspect that that's not going to be in the cards for KD, and he's probably going to miss out because of this stretch of games that he has missed. And finally, LeBron James. For as great as LeBron has played over the last couple of months since the first straw poll, this marks the 2nd one in a row when LeBron has gotten no votes. And, to me, for as well as LeBron is playing, I think that's an indication of the fact that it's been such a disappointing season for the Lakers as a team. It's very hard to reward him individually with MVP votes when you look at the success that these other guys are having, both from a team standpoint and from an individual standpoint. So no LeBron once again. And it's also a sign of the number of guys that are out this year with injuries. No Paul George, no Kawhi Leonard, no Anthony Davis, who's just been, a little bit subpar to his normal play. no James Harden, who obviously has had his own issues this year with the Brooklyn Nets before being traded to the Philadelphia 76ers at the trade deadline last week. So a lot of familiar names are not on this list. Obviously Ja Morant is the new one that is on it. But once again, we are set up with what could be a really thrilling MVP race over these final couple of months of the season. Got Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic locked in a pretty heavy battle, first and second. I think Yataseda Kupo has a chance to sneak in there and potentially get it, depending on how things shake out on the court. And all I can tell you is we'll be back in a couple of months to break it down and see where it ends up. But there's little doubt there's going to be a lot of emotion and a lot of talk about this over the next several weeks, as there's few things people love to debate more than who should be this year's MVP, who should be the MVP of an individual season. And with several really compelling candidates, and none of them, at least as of now, likely to have the normal, hey, this guy's got the best player on the best team treatment, let's give him the award. It sets up for what's going to be, in my opinion, an awfully juicy debate. I look forward to having it. So hope you all enjoy reading the straw poll. You can find it on ESPN.com right now. Go check it out. You can see all the vote totals, see how it shakes out, how it compares to ones in the past. And we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.